welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. I'm your host, and I am here with my illustrious co-host.
Hi, I'm Jen.
And this is like one of the highlights of our year every year. Other authors who listen to this, we love you. We didn't no shade, but the last few years we have had the absolute pleasure of talking to this author. Every single one of his books is better than the last. And let's get to it. Chuck Tingle, welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast.
What an intro. And the feeling is mutual. I love coming back. Here's the thing. Publishers always encourage you to put out a book a year. And not every author can do that. I am proud to say that I've kept up with the novel a year schedule. But what that does is it means that there's certain folks who you have these like chats with once a year. And it's just really kind of nice to catch up. You like develop these relationships, and it's really nice. So it's an honor to be back and to see you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. So this book is called Fabulous Bodies, which is a fabulous book. It's got so much going on. And before we started recording, Jen and I were just kind of talking a little bit about, the title and like what we felt it meant and how it related to the characters. But Chuck, in your own words, can you give us an elevator pitch about what Fabulous Bodies is about?
Yes. Okay. So Fabulous Bodies is the story of a influencer who moonlights as a bit of a grave robber, although she's not technically digging anyone up. She's more stealing bodies from morgues and similar places and then selling them on the black market. And the premise of the book is that when her idol dies, a queer icon, a rock star named Eddie Michaels, she is tasked with picking up his body, and then the body wakes up. And that is just the beginning of the book. And I think with most of my books, I am proud and happy to say that I feel like you can really give like a sentence, like summary or log line, and have no idea what the book's going to be. They always, I think, take off in a very different direction. So I would say that's our starting point, and where we end up is somewhere very different, I think.
Oh, yeah,
Absolutely.
I'd love to talk a little bit about I guess, shaping Poppy Stringer as a character and her relationship to Eddie, because she starts out as a fan and it gets complicated from there. But it really made me think a lot about my own relationships with pop stars, especially those who sort of revealed to me who I was or showed me parts of myself I wasn't aware of. So can you talk about shaping that dynamic?
Yes. I mean, gosh, there's so much there. It's a bit of a chicken or the egg, because I always knew that this book was, and I set out to write like in theater, you would call it like a two-hander, where there's essentially two lead characters. And a lot of the book is based on their dynamic. It's a lot of dialogue between the two of them. And so it's kind of like there's no Poppy without Eddie, and there's no Eddie without Poppy. So I kind of had to make them both at the same time. And I think the comparisons would be, they have so much similarity, and yet they are of different generations. So there's a sort of like a old school entertainment and a new school entertainment. I think they are both embodiments of what happens when you put entertainment or fame above everything else. And there's like a modernized version of that, and then there's the old way of doing that. And I think it's very fun to like put those two sides together and then see what comes of that. It's a really fun dynamic, I think. And then the other thing, she is an influencer, and she's also very unlikable, especially at the beginning. She's like she does some pretty horrible things. And so there's always this balancing act where even going into this, I thought my goal was, if I have these two characters, I want at the beginning you to kind of dislike Poppy and kind of love Eddie. And then as the book goes, for those feelings to basically very slowly swap was a bit of like the tightrope that I was trying to do. And I think I managed to do that because, influencers it's very easy to make fun of that. And I feel like I never really wanted to be mean-spirited, but there's still plenty to make fun of, if that makes sense. I think maybe in my book Camp Damascus, there's this character Saul who is like this very religious character who stays religious throughout the book. And I think another author might think, well, we're criticizing religion, so we need to really like make fun of this character of Saul or something. And I never wanted to do that. I wanted it to be more like human and nuanced. And so I think the same thing's here with Poppy, where like she is an influencer and she is a difficult character to kind of like meet up with. But I think if you don't come at it with hate, and if you come at it with like kind of empathy for why someone would be in this circumstance, then you can really like create a cool character.
And I think you really did, because one thing I don't believe we've mentioned is that Poppy is a mom. She has a little girl named Marlo who she has no regard for a lot of things, right? Like Poppy, as you said, she's a grave robber, quote unquote. She takes bodies from the morgue and she sells them. She absolutely adores her daughter. Like there is no question in my mind. Every time I was like, oh, Poppy, you are a really hard character to read. She would talk about Marlo or she'd interact with Marlo and you would just see the love under there. And you kind of got that feeling of, desperation, that she wanted her daughter to have a specific type of life. She wanted to give her a life that she wasn't able to have because Poppy herself grew up in foster care. She grew up, not really having access to the things that she wants her daughter to have. And she also has this friend, Noah, who humanizes her too, because they have a very nuanced and very close relationship. So there really was that balance with her between all of those unlikable parts, and then the rest of it that kind of came in the more you meet Eddie, that reminded you as to why Poppy had these qualities that made her more than what she seemed.
Yes, yeah, I think a key, when I'm working on a character that I know is unlikable, I think there's two things that you can do there. One is I think an audience will go along on a journey with an unlikable character if they're really good at what they do. Sometimes I think of it as like the Don Draper effect, because I always think of it with Mad Men is he's just really good at what he does. But it's also like, Tony Soprano was like this. Funny enough, there's a lot of male characters like this. Walter White. There are all these characters who do bad things, but we love them because they're really skilled. And there's a certain thing about a story, even if someone is morally, not on the same page with us, we do enjoy seeing people who are very competent going about things. I also think, speaking of kind of like the gendered issues of the character, that this kind of character is very often male. And I kind of like the idea of like going against that, of making this like a female character who had that unlikability, but was incredibly competent, and also to have like a young woman and an influencer who is very competent and like smart. I think it would be so easy to, this influencer, of course, they're vapid and dumb. And it's one thing to be, I am vain too. Poppy is vain, so am I. So I can relate there. But I was like, but she's not dumb. She's not incompetent. She's like very, very good at what she does. And so I think that definitely helps the character. And then the other thing I think is, her goal, if we can understand what her goal is, and it is, I guess for lack of a better word, like a righteous goal that we can that we can understand, and she just goes about it the wrong way, I think it's really something that you can connect to, because like you said, you never doubt that, like, she loves her daughter more than anything. And we can see that and go, oh, I can get behind that. I get it, I like it. And then you're just kind of, the thing that's really upsetting you is you're kind of saying, oh no, but not like that. Like that's not how you show that you love someone. And so I think that makes it interesting too, is to like understand the goal and the love, but just see like, oh gosh, you're so good at all these other things. And you just have this blind spot that the readers are like, this is not how you get someone to love you back, basically.
Yeah.
I would love to ask about Eddie, if there were artists who sort of went into his genetic makeup, as it were, if there were, any touchstones or anything, because he is representative of this, sort of glam movement that covered a couple decades.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious about like what it is to shape a pop icon and a
Yes.
queer icon on the page.
So this is really interesting because initially when I had the idea for the story, I knew essentially like the thing in my head was, I don't know if you've seen this movie. There's a movie called Collateral with Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx. And I love that movie. It's one of my favorite movies. And I always thought like, what if you did Collateral with like a monster and instead of a hitman? And I thought, gosh, that's a really fun idea because there's so much you can do with just like two characters in this enclosed space over like the course of a night. So I had a few ideas where that was like kind of like just this kernel of inspiration of like, gosh, that'd be really cool to do. And I kind of had Poppy, and then originally I knew like what the monster was going to be, but originally the idea was something a little more like witchy and groovy, and it was going to be like a Stevie Nicks sort of like a groovy Laurel Canyon kind of thing, and really push like the witchy thing that kind of like Stevie Nicks has. And I was going through the plot and everything and trying to figure out how that would work, and it just wasn't working. Like I went over and over again, and I was like, I like the character, I like the idea. I certainly, as a fan myself of Stevie Nicks, I was like, oh, this would be really fun. But it just didn't make sense. I was like, there's no like energy here. When you set these two characters in the cab, there isn't like that spark and that fire. And then a friend of mine was like, oh, well, what if you like swap the gender? What if instead of like the 70s, like, witchy woman kind of thing up in Laurel Canyon, what if you did like this sort of like Elton John or like the Freddie Mercury or like that kind of thing? And I was like, yes, that. So then I dropped back into these scenes and I put those two together in the car, and it was like explosive. Suddenly everything was just working. There were all these comparisons. So the development is interesting because originally like Eddie was just Eddie wasn't even Eddie. And the second, I wasn't even going to write, I was thinking, oh, I'm probably not going to write this book because it just wasn't working. And then the second I figured out, no, it's going to be like that 70s glam, like piano rock kind of thing, then it just worked. Then it was off to the races. And I was like, okay, this is a book now.
So first of all, I have to laugh because Jen literally mentioned Collateral before we started recording. She said, she's like, it makes me think a little bit of that movie Collateral, right? And I was like, oh yeah. So that was very funny.
Yes, that was a huge inspiration point for sure. Yes.
And I remember thinking while reading it too, I think I'll try to stay vague here, but while Poppy is at the first crossroads where she can either, go along with things or resist a little bit, I was waiting and I'm like, there's a version of this, like perhaps directed by Jim Jarmusch, where she behaves and they just have like a real cool time and a great conversation.
Yes. And I like that. I liked what was neat about it is that with this concept, you can kind of take the pacing. And this isn't really a spoiler because everyone knows it's a horror novel. So you kind of assume going in that thing is going to go off the rails, right? But I do like being able to, at the beginning of the book, because Eddie is so likable, you can really like stretch out like, oh, is he that bad? Like, do I trust him? Is this
Yeah.
just going to be a fun little time? And I really tried to hold off as long as I could because I was like, gosh, we can make a really interesting moment if we can the longer we hold off, you're kind of like, okay, maybe, okay, that's a little weird, but let's go along with it. Like the longer you can stretch that out, then the moment that you realize, oh, he is bad, can be really, really powerful. And so I think it is. I think it's like a very disturbing moment because everything up to it is kind of like funny and he's creepy, but you're not like, you don't like dislike him. You almost still trust him until the very moment. And so it's cool to be able to play with that pacing.
You also don't know what's going on. You're like, oh, Eddie is this icon and he was dead, but now he's back. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? But
Yes.
yeah. Another thing that I did want to talk about also, and I kind of alluded to it in the beginning of the interview, was this idea about a body and fabulous bodies and the commodification of bodies, which you can take in a lot of different ways, right? You can take it as Poppy as an influencer. She commodifies how she looks. She also literally steals bodies. And she talks a little bit about the like the transition between when you're alive and when you're dead. And then there's, Eddie himself, who is a fabulous body. One of the things I really, really took from this book was the idea of empathy for what a person is. That number one, they're more than their body, and that number two, they were a person. Like this is a person who was loved. This was a person who had family. This is not just body horror, which it is, but you think about that this person lived a life before that. And Poppy really has to start thinking about that for reasons.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's so many themes of bodily autonomy, right? Like who gets to control what bodies and Poppy, uses her own body and she also uses other people's bodies. And so it's a really nice thing to say like, okay, is one of those wrong? Is both of those wrong? Is neither of those wrong? And to really put the point home of, we can do whatever we want with our own bodies. And that the second that you step into other people's bodies, that's when it becomes an issue. And I think it can, like, that's such a hard line that it can be really easy to say, like, oh, well, wait, no, but you should be able and kind of overcomplicate it when really, even with this book, there's all these strings and different types of bodies being used for different things. And ultimately, you kind of realize, oh, no, it's very simple. You can use your own body and you can't use other people's. And so I think that's kind of, that's a big part of the message. The other thing is this book is, I am an agnostic, and so I don't really, I've never been like a very religious person nor a spiritual person, but I think as I have started to write horror and just at this point in my life, I've become more spiritual. So a lot of the questions that I was asking in this book are spiritual questions like, is there anything outside of our body? And what does that mean ethically for all these different issues? And I think ultimately where I landed, and kind of the point of the book is, when you think about that too much, I think you lose track of the real answer. And the real answer is that it doesn't matter. And I think that's kind of the point of the whole thing of it, like, if you are just going to show respect for the body, whether you believe in a soul or not, or whether they're connected, whether they're not, ultimately, it doesn't matter. Just have respect for the body. The body without a soul is important enough. And I think that there's so much of trying to like pull these apart or answer all these questions. And it's like, it doesn't matter what the answer is. You just have respect for the body either way,
Yeah.
That makes a ton of sense to me. And something that I was also very interested in is we talked a little bit about it, sort of, I guess, the parasocial relationship aspect with a pop star, particularly how that might be important for queer folks who haven't quite really come into their identities yet or are not fully aware. Um, there's something really interesting, I think, about like Eddie and his like truth-telling ability, right? And does that have, are those things related in a way?
Well, I mean, so Eddie's ability, I think really the key to the book is that Eddie and Poppy are both influencers. And that's a bit of a play on words, but it is, I think when you're reading it, once that clicks, you're like, oh, yeah, this is just a book about influencers and what it means to be an influencer in every different permutation of that word, right? So there's certainly that, and its relationship to culture, like what you can get away with when you are an influencer in every sense of the word. How people have been irresponsible with that, including famous, people, and all the issues that come along with that. I think, Eddie is. There's a few lines that directly reference that. And I think ultimately you could say like, oh, that's a generational thing, right? Because we have had kind of movements where we address this, but ultimately it's not. This is still something that happens. And to your point about, it's the relationship to queer culture. This is a book about, I guess, stan culture, which is so as a older buckaroo, using that word is so funny because I always think, does everyone know that you're referencing an Eminem song when you use this? It's like such a funny thing that we just say stan culture, and this is like, okay, this is just an Eminem reference, but it's true. I will say that there are very toxic aspects of that culture, like I kind of just addressed. But in queer culture, we take it to kind of another level. I'm gonna just say, to be honest, the queer stan culture can take things to levels that are pretty wild, and so that's kind of something I wanted to address in this book as well, because all of my books are queer horror, but I think I'm kind of touching on issues of queer culture, and that is just one that I've noticed and been thinking about. It's like, what is it about queer culture that makes kind of that sort of celebrity thing take on this like very toxic air sometimes?
How did you get the inspiration for Poppy's non-influencer career? Kind of taking it back to the very beginning, the very, main level of the story, although it does relate to the story as a whole because she is supposed to be stealing Eddie's body. How did that come to you? Because
Yes.
that was brilliant.
I mean, it's all thematic, right? Like it's funny because I put so much like theme in my stories where like every single thing that happens in my books happens for like there's so many little details that are all like thematic details. And this is just, one of them where it's like, okay, well, how do you get them together in the first place? I had an idea actually for a short story, which I write my Tinglers, which are short, but as far as horror, I don't write short horror. I've been asked to do anthologies and things like that. And I was like, no, if I have a good idea, it needs to be good enough to be a novel or like nothing at all. But I had an idea about a bodies dealer who was dealing dead bodies and two people at a gun range who wanted to like shoot real bodies out in the desert in Nevada. And then one of the bodies wakes up. And it was like it was a short story idea that I had. And for a minute I thought, okay, maybe this will be in like some collection. I'll finally do like a little short story for one of these anthologies or something. And then I was like, no, I knew there was a bit of magic there. And so I took it and then I set it aside. And then when I started to think about this idea, I was like, oh, that's perfect. Like in fact, that was the opening chapter. The only thing that was really edited out of this book from my original, like the story beats, there was an original, actually it was a second chapter. There was a second chapter that I just removed from the book because I wanted to get to Poppy and Eddie quicker. But the second chapter of this book was essentially that short story idea I had, where the first chapter, as it is, she picks up a body and like takes out to the desert. And then we kind of jump ahead because I wanted to get to like the meat of the story. But originally, that the second chapter kind of would have been similar to what my short story idea was. And you kind of see the transaction and what she does. And part of the reason I actually got rid of it for two reasons. One, because I just, like I said, I just wanted to get the story going. But two, it made Poppy way too unlikable. She's already kind of unlikable, but I think the more you dwell on what her career actually is, the worse she gets. There's a bit of like a magic trick as an author going on where you know what it is, but I don't dwell on it. And with that second chapter in there, it was just, you're like, this is a awful person, because you're really forced to like sit with it and think with it. And I thought, I don't know if people are going to go all along for the ride if I keep the second chapter here.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it is. There's, gosh, so much interesting thematic work, as you say, and it made me think a lot about sort of how we relate to celebrity and to bodies and all of these things, and just how like pop stars can be mirrors in which we see ourselves, and that can be good or bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think it's a wild ride. It's a fun ride. It's a ride that makes you think, and it was fabulous. So thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
No, I think that's it for me, unless there are any hints you can give us about what is next for you.
Oh gosh. Well, it's interesting. So I always write my books a couple of novels ahead. So whenever I have something coming out, that means generally the way my schedule goes is right now, like when I'm gearing up to release the book, go on the tour and stuff, that means I'm going to start my edits for next summer's book, because they're done, and I'm doing little quotes here for people listening and not watching. They're done, but that still means that generally means they're like I've edited it like 3 times about, and then it's going to the publisher, and then there's like just more stuff. There's more edits, a little more process. So what's next is I'm diving in and starting to edit next year's book, which I'm really excited about. And then I'm also kind of finishing up, gosh, I guess the book 2 years from now. So, I have a bunch of stuff sitting here, but it's all kind of done. And I think that's what makes that so exciting, is that I love leaving little Easter eggs and little hints in my books about like what's coming next. Actually, in Lucky Day, Agent Lane, one of the 2 main characters, one of his suggestions is to go see Eddie Michaels, because he's got like a residency at Caesars. And so I like putting stuff in my books that are about the next year's one. And what's interesting about this next one is that I don't think there's there's some connections to Fabulous Bodies in certain ways, but actually, like the big connection to this one is all the way back to Bury Your Gaze. There's a mention of where this book takes place in Bury Your Gaze that I think anyone reading that book would just think, oh, that must be something. I don't really know what that is, but I think when the next book comes out, you'll be able to read Bury Your Gaze and go, oh, wow, that's wild. They talk about this in this book from like 3 years ago, so that's kind of fun.
Well, very good. Thank you so much. A pleasure as always. Hopefully we'll be chatting with you next year about your next book.
Oh, we will. I can't wait. It's so nice to see you. I really do. Honestly, it's such an honor and so nice to have this web of connections and folks that, you get to see and stop in on and stuff. So it's really nice. And it's been great to talk. And I can't wait to see you on the book tour.
Yeah. I'm excited about that as well.
Yes. Oh my
That'll
God.
be great. Oh my gosh. Because I've only seen you through this computer screen. So in real life, That'll be wonderful.
3D.
3D,
yeah.
yes.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
All right. Do we want to wrap up then? Once again, this was Jessica with Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. My amazing co-host, my fabulous co-host was
Jen, thank you.
and we were talking with
Chuck Tingle.
and check out Fabulous Bodies and everything else that Chuck has written because it is all amazing.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.